So you have the balance sheet of all the African multilateral institutions, from the AFDB to Afreximbank to Shelter Afrique and others, standing at about 65 billion US dollar. However, all the EMFIs only account for under 3% of all external debts raised by African countries, even as the continent faces a significant financing gap in their pursuit of Agenda 2036 and the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Africa program of the Center for Strategic and International Studies put together a panel on the sidelines of the recently concluded spring meetings in Washington. The idea was to discuss the impact of Africa's multilateral institutions on the continent's economic development.
You can't rely just on global growth anymore to develop. We saw how the Asians pulled themselves out of poverty, right? Dramatic export-led development that had transformative impacts. Africans want to sort of ride the same train, but we may discover that it's not going to be so easy to ride that train. So what we need is to grow on the back of our own markets, and we need to get the African economic community going. It's not a new discussion. Ever since, 40, 50 years ago, there was a vision, there was a dream that Africa had, which was to create a big enough economy that creates scale opportunities, efficiency, and also attracts foreign investment on the back of a large marketplace, right? We all know that investors like the scale opportunity, right? You want demand, current demand and future demand, and Africa had it all, but Africa's fragmented. And so there's a very big political job to bring it together. But once that has happened, you need financial institutions who are specialized who can do that. Because if you were to ask, a lot of banks out of Europe or here in North America, financing intra-Africa trade or financing industrial projects or agribusiness projects that involve regional value propositions is not their bread and butter. It's not their forte. For us, it is our forte, right? So we're there to actually help be part of the incentives that enable agglomeration investments, large investments in various sectors with a cross-border mindset to it, right? And that's why our sovereigns created us. That's why they gave us special powers, the immunities and privileges, all the things that the World Bank Group has here. But the reason Africa created a whole stable of specialized African financial institutions is to actually push on specific thrusts that, the rest of the world is not seeing as their priority. So regional economic integration is a very specific African agenda. And you can't expect somebody all the way out east or out west to buy that priority and say that we're going to throw our weight behind it, because it's really not their issue, right? We saw how the Europeans did it. The Europeans got together, created the EU, created specialized EU institutions, and they integrated their markets and created financial institutions to drive that agenda. That is what African institutions like us are trying to do, right? But we're doing it in a very difficult environment.
Right, and let's come back to that difficult environment a bit later. But what I've heard from you in terms of the gaps, it's a vision for African development, moving from fragmentation to scale, and also dealing with the kind of, asymmetric information about the African continent and the knowledge of what's required for development. So I think those are three key messages I got from you, Admasu. Habib, I've been corrected that Shelter Afrique is older than TDB. Is that right? Tell us why was Shelter Afrique created, and what gap is it filling?
Actually, we don't mind to be said we only even 16 years old, underage, because that gives us a lot of opportunities to to do more. We are actually 42 years old. So we are actually much older than many of our sister institutions that are part of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, AMFI. So we were created in 1982 by the African Development Bank and African nations to really address one critical sector that is really a development sector and really structural sector, which is urban development and housing. As you know, following the independence days, most nations in Africa were pretty young, and the housing crisis hit hard. So it was very critical for the governments to basically encourage the African Development Bank to create an institution that is specialized. So we are a specialized institution that focuses on affordable housing and urban development. And this is across the full value chain, which tells you that basically we affect not only the supply of homes, building infrastructure, but also capital markets on the demand side, similar to what you have here in the US, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, where we've set up mortgage refinancing companies to help provide long-term funding to the banks in the different countries to allow those banks to on-lend long-term for mortgages. Because as you know, the longer the tenor or the maturity of the mortgages, the more affordable those mortgages and those homes could be. So I guess I took a long time to answer that. We are 42 years old. Do you have any other question for me?
Well, Habib, you've answered the gap that you're trying to fill, which is, and I think you said it's both on the supply side in terms of the infrastructure gap in urban environments, and obviously on the continent, urban environments are very important and getting larger and larger every day. But it's also on the demand side of the financial sector deepening in some way, right? Because you're creating new instruments.